before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Wadi Wadi people of the Dharawal Nation. We'd also like to acknowledge the injustice of colonial invasion. This land was never ceded, and these injustices are continuing today. FemSoc has a safer spaces policy, so that means while we're encouraging questions and learning, we want to make sure that they're all respectful of the people around you. So that means homophobia, transphobia, sexism, cissexism, racism, classism is not tolerated, and we're happy to point you to resources outside afterwards. But we kind of want to encourage you to kind of pick up if someone has said something problematic, if you feel comfortable doing it, because we all kind of recognise that we're all on a learning process. If you're wanting to ask a question that you think someone else in the room might have had some traumatic experiences with, it's a good idea to kind of put a content warning just before you ask the question, so to give people kind of space to distance themselves from the conversation if they would like. And also I have leaflets from Resistance, and they're doing like a feminist forum in week 9 on Thursday, so we've got like leaflets for that. I think it's going to be sort of like a discussion group about feminism for the 21st century. So they're here. Now passing over to Amy.
Hello. I think most of you know I'm Amy. I'm 25 and I'm studying politics and gender studies, and I also have cerebral palsy. So this talk is mostly just going to be anecdotal, I feel like. It's just going to be talking a lot about my experiences with disability. Obviously it's very personal and I don't speak for everybody with disabilities. You know, the term disability encompasses so many different conditions, and I can't possibly speak for every single thing that's on the spectrum within that, but in terms of my very physical disability, like that's the place that I'm coming from. So I want to encourage you to ask questions or speak up if you feel like you have a point to add in, like, at any point when I'm talking about something. Just out of interest, do any of you have a disability? Whether that's like emotional, psychological, physical? No?
Yeah, I have dyslexia, so like...
Okay, yep, that's definitely on there. Okay, good to know. Good. Okay, cool. So I've got like 4 main points that I'm going to try and get through. I'm a waffler, so I might deviate from the plan a little bit, but basically I'm going to start with disability and identity, disability and socialising, disability and sex, maybe, we'll see how it goes, and just the disability services available on campus and stuff, if you weren't aware. So when I was really young, say like 5 or 6, I sort of knew there was something different about me, but I wasn't quite sure what that was. And when I was like at that age, I don't think I really registered. I was quite an oblivious sort of kid, you know, just trying to like be happy and play and do as much stuff as I could. And you know, I think kids at that age are generally pretty happy as well. Like they don't really notice difference so much. So it wasn't really an issue for me until I hit maybe about 10 or 12, and then kids started asking me like, what's wrong with you, and that sort of stuff, and I didn't really have the words or the knowledge to explain like what my situation is. So basically with cerebral palsy, it's a neurological disability. It occurs when like a child is born prematurely and there's some sort of complication at birth that either like restricts oxygen, or there is some sort of physical occurrence that affects, you know, the birth happening as it should. And basically what happened with me was my mum had a cyst in her uterus, and it burst when she was about, I think, 3 months pregnant or something like that. So I was super tiny when I was born, like just under a kilo. It was like 997 grams, like super, super tiny. And basically they thought my mum was going to bleed to death and that I wouldn't last the night, but none of those things happened. I'm alive, she's alive, it's all fine. But it was a pretty miraculous, I guess, occurrence in that sense. And I'm here today, and basically like the remnants of that traumatic birth are that my muscles don't really know how to communicate with each other very well. Like my brain has attained some brain damage from that birth, so like the neurons don't really fire the way they should and the muscles are very tense because of that. I like to use the analogy of like, you know, like after you've had like a really big run and your muscles are all really tense and you're just like, you're feeling achy and stuff. That's basically what my body is like the majority of the time. So like it can be quite painful, but I wouldn't say it's debilitatingly so. It's just enough to be like, oh, that's a bit annoying. Like it's not, yeah, it doesn't sort of affect me from day to day, but over time that will probably get worse, just because like with cerebral palsy you're in the same positions every day, you're not really getting the stretches that maybe people that can walk around and move a bit more freely would get. So as I get older that will increase, but at this point it's not so much of an issue. And so with that, when I was about 10 or 12, I didn't really know much about cerebral palsy, which is funny because, you know, you think, oh, it's your disability, you should know. Oh no, like when I was 12 I didn't really care, I didn't really think it was anything to talk to anyone else about, like it was very much my thing. And in a way I think that was because there was a lot of shame attached to it. I never wanted to see myself as somebody with a disability, I just wanted to be normal. And for like the majority of high school, especially from the ages of 14 to 16 or 17, I wanted to ignore it completely. Like I didn't even want to bring it up with people, I didn't want to address it, and if anybody asked me questions about it I would get really defensive. And life was really hard at that point because I was obviously trying to ignore a very obvious and huge part of my identity, right? And it was really hard to relate to people in that sense. And it wasn't until I got up to like 17, 18, and I'm like, come on, like you probably should address this at some point. You can't go through your whole life being like this miserable person that's just like being so rude to people, you know? It doesn't make you any more relatable. It just creates this wall between people and it doesn't allow them to feel close to you. And that's something that I want to stress with this talk is like, disability, rather than it being something to be ashamed of or to have a stigma over, I think it should be something that should be embraced as any sort of difference. Like say if you're from another culture or you like sport, I mean I don't understand sport, but you know, I'm happy to learn. I feel like disability should be the same. Like people don't really understand or know much about it, but it's a facet of your personality anyway, and you should be able to talk openly about it and feel like it's not something to be ashamed of. That's something that took a long time for me to do, just because, like I say, I didn't have the words and I didn't really want to acknowledge it. But once I started researching and finding out information about it and learning as much as I could, it was a lot easier to talk about. And in a way, like talking about it also validates your experience. So like maybe with your dyslexia, you would find like if you mentioned it to somebody, they might, you know, say, oh, is that a real thing or whatever. But if you have the words to say, well, no, actually it affects me in this way, they go, oh, okay, so it's legitimate, you know, like it's an actual thing. With me, it's a bit different. Obviously, my disability is very visible, so I've never really had the issue of people not legitimizing it for me. Like I have a few friends that look normal, for lack of a better word, and they often get stares and derision from people when, you know, maybe they're taking a little bit longer to walk around, or, you know, they're just bumbling or whatever. People don't realise that they're actually physically restrained in that sense, and they get a lot of backlash for that. But for me, I don't have that. But yeah, so basically, what was my main point? Yeah, just don't be afraid to discuss disability openly with people around you. And I guess it's different with everyone, but a point that I want to make is if you want to ask a disabled person a question, if it feels like an intrusive or inappropriate question, chances are it's an intrusive or inappropriate question, and you probably shouldn't ask. My experience is with other disabled people, once you get to know them and you talk with them, they will reveal it to you. If they want you to know, they'll let you know. it's not something that should be brought up, because for some people maybe there's trauma involved, like if they've had an accident or something like that. You shouldn't put your curiosity above somebody else's comfort, is the important thing to remember, I feel. But at the same time, I don't think you should feel afraid to ask people, but just wait for the appropriate moment, I guess. So basically what I've done in my life to help me manage the emotional aspects of disability is using humour as best as I can. So I think most of you guys know, my nickname is Hot Wheels, and that's a nickname that my friend Theo gave me in first year, and I've kind of just used it for myself, and it's a good way to break the ice when I'm meeting new people. It's like, oh no, what's your name? Oh, I'm Hot Wheels. And they just go, oh, okay, cool. And it just immediately says to them, oh, so I don't have to be awkward. Most people, for me, because it is so obvious, they feel this awkward, how do I approach this? And that just lets them know it's okay. I'm aware of this, you're aware of this, we've got it covered. So yeah. And humour also, it diffuses the tension in situations, and it does make you more relatable. And once I realised that, it was a lot easier to be disabled in that sense, because it wasn't this huge, massive thing that I had to hide. It was just, another facet of being Amy, let's say. So I'm already on to point 2. Look at me go. So disability and socialising. So for a while I was pretty afraid to sort of express to people what my limits were and that I needed help in certain situations. I would feel, I'm quite prideful as a person, I feel like, and I don't like to ask for help where I can, but at the same time it's pretty obvious when I do need help. And I feel like if you have a disability, it's important to express your limits and let your friends know what you can and can't do, and to not be ashamed to ask for help, because really everybody needs help sometimes. With people with disabilities, it's a lot more obvious, or maybe a lot more common, and in that way it's important to have open communication with people around you. Fatigue and socialising is another big thing for me. I know if I have a big day, one big day where I'm just doing lots of things, I'll need 1 or 2 days recovery where I don't do much at all, and that's just my own personal limits. And I'm lucky, I haven't had any sort of petty friends that have been like, oh, why won't you come out? That's so lame, blah, blah, blah. But I'm sure people get that experience, right? But yeah, luckily, with you guys, it'd be more oh, okay, she's not feeling up to it, that's okay, we'll do it another time. I think that's important to keep in mind when you're interacting with people with disabilities, is if you don't understand a certain facet of, why they're not feeling well, it's okay to ask, are you okay? Do you want me to help? But sometimes maybe they'll just need some time alone to recharge and to get back to where they feel is the best version of them, and that's fine. It's also important to be aware, knowing a person's limits and the sort of things that they can and can't do, to offer alternatives when you're socialising with them. So going out to Amigos, for me, it was always a strain, because obviously, I don't know if you guys have been to Amigos, most of you would have, I would say. Yeah, the Mexican restaurant, yeah. It's not accessible in any sense, really. And I'd go there because that was a really popular spot to go to 2 years ago, even though the food's never been that great. I don't get why everybody loves it. It's super cheap, yeah, but it's shit. Anyway, so I'd go there just because all my mates would be there, but it'd be a real hassle for me to get there. And a lot of the time I'd just be no, I'm not gonna go, I'm gonna sit at home, and then I'd feel bad because all my friends would be at this place and I'd feel like I'd miss out. I wish I would have said at the time, how about this place? Why don't we go here instead of, But I feel like people with disabilities already, in some sense, maybe subconsciously, maybe consciously, already feel like a burden on their friends a lot of the time, and they don't want to actively bring up an alternative because they don't want to be that person. So maybe when you're making these plans, consider them and just be oh, what about this option? If you don't feel comfortable with this, we can always do this. Just put the option out there, and that gives them the option to choose, I guess. It makes it a lot easier.
Sorry, did you ever have struggles and frustrations when maybe they wouldn't consider your limitations?
Yeah.
Especially when maybe it was repetitive and it was like, I can't do this, why, and it makes you feel really left out.
Oh yeah, definitely. High school, hugely so. Just because I guess everybody's a bit selfish in high school and they're just really only thinking of themselves. I remember, I think, was it year 12? Yeah, it was like the start of year 12, and my main group of friends, I had a few different groups, but the main group that I spent most of my time with, one of the girls in the group was handing out these little flyers that she'd made, and I was looking around and I was like, what are these flyers? She's like, oh yeah, this is our end of schoolies plans. Like, oh yeah, where are you going? She's like, oh, this beach in blah 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 blah. And I'm sort of waiting for her to like hand me a flyer, and she doesn't, and I've just realised, so you're not inviting me to your plans. Is that because it's obviously inaccessible, or do you just not want me to be at this place? And I switched groups. I made my own group. It was great. We were like the artsy weird kids that nobody else liked, and that was fine. That was my people, so it was alright. But at that point, yeah, that was kind of like the pinnacle, but there'd been lots of points up until that point where it was like, oh, we have this plan, we're going to do this, and I'd just be sitting there like, oh, okay, and like I wouldn't, because my self-confidence wasn't that good, I wouldn't say, hi, are you trying to find us?
Yes.
Okay, come in. So I'm just talking about instances in high school when maybe I felt excluded and stuff like that. I'm trying to bring that in. So there have definitely been instances, but I would say as I've gotten older, it's been a lot easier just to be like, hey guys, did you think that maybe I couldn't do this thing? Maybe we want to do this other thing. Most of the time people are like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, of course, I didn't even think of it. Because usually, like, it's fairly common. If it's not an affliction that you yourself have, why would you think about it? It's not something that registers for you, right? So it's not until, you have a friend that's sort of in that situation that you go, oh, okay, this could be a problem, which is fine. Like, I don't hold it against people. But when it's like an active thing that I have to keep reminding people of, then it's a problem. But I don't really have those people in my life anymore, so it's okay. It's not a problem. Just don't need that anymore. Let's see. Oh, we're already up to the fun part. All right, video time. Yeah, so I'll just reiterate that for the recording. That YouTube clip was wheelchair dating questions by BuzzFeed. If you just type that into YouTube, it'll come up. She's really funny and has, I would say, a really good attitude about her disability. That's the kind of attitude that I try to emulate. Just very open, but also importantly limited as well. Like, there are certain boundaries that you shouldn't cross with most people, and people with disabilities often find those are the most being crossed for them. Like, it's super weird. People think just because you're disabled, like, they can touch you or pray for you or invade your personal space, and it's just like, that's not okay. That's not okay for that person over there. Why are you doing that to me? Like, so I think that attitude is the optimum one to have, just especially keeping the lines of communication open and realizing that dating somebody, whoa, that guy has amazing dreadlocks. I'm sorry. Super long. So distracting. Yeah, it's important to keep the lines of communication open.
Sorry, just to interrupt you. There's something I've noticed about both you and the chicken video, is that it's really, because when you first came in, I was just like, I was terrified. Contrary to popular belief, I have terrible social skills. So I was just like, okay, so where do we start? But you're just so bubbly, and you're so happy to be around, and you're so confident in yourself despite your disability, and it just made that first interaction with you a lot easier. So it also really depends on the person. Because
definitely.
Like, there are people who don't have disabilities, and it's just a terror. When you see them, you're just like, Jesus, why? Why? God, come for me now. What have I done to deserve this? So also if you accept yourself for what you are and you tell people, look, this is just what I am. If you don't like me, go. You know, again, it's going to be just that much easier, you know, to interact with people. And people who are not going to like you, you know, because you're disabled, you know, pieces of shit. It's like, well, you know, good riddance, bye.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? So it's also, I mean, there's a lot of common sense in it as well, because when you meet someone for the first time, you don't ask someone, so how many men have you slept with? They'll be like, why?
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
It's a very common sense thing.
That's right.
So it doesn't really matter whether or not you're disabled. It's just, you know, basic social skills.
Yeah, definitely.
Which very many people lack.
Yeah, that's true. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thanks for
sorry,
bringing
it's
that up.
just something I noticed and I just felt I had to.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I've actively worked on as well. That's not always, I wasn't always as open and friendly as I am now. That's definitely something, like I was saying before, in high school I was very defensive and reserved and didn't want to talk about my disability, or just myself generally, because maybe I didn't have like good self-esteem at that point. But now that I've learned to talk openly about my disability, I feel like that's filtered into all aspects of my personality. It's just made me a more open person in general. I should say that not every person with a disability has as good communication skills as I have. There are people that are shy about it, or are defensive about it, or maybe just completely lack the physical capabilities to talk about it. Like, I have met a few people that are severely physically disabled, but mentally they're fine, but they can't articulate speech. So when it comes to interacting with those people, I would say there's an added barrier of maybe awkwardness, or like a level of, there's definitely a level of how do I approach this person. I, in my personal experience, I like to just talk to them as I would talk to a regular person, and then just being patient with them, seeing how they respond. Like, there was a guy that I'd met a few years ago who was in an electric chair, and he could only move one of his hands, but he used that hand to type into a little like an electric screen, and that would, like, he'd type in his sentences and that would speak for him. So obviously, like, communicating with him took longer because it took him a while to, you know, type out the sentences and then listen and then, you know, say my response, and then for him to type out his response again. But at the same time, this guy was incredibly intelligent. He knew what was going on, and he was quite funny as well, and it was really interesting. It was like a really different way to interact with the person through this little piece of technology. So I feel like you should, if you're willing, definitely give it a try. Like, it's important to experience all different ways of communicating with people, and if it's uncomfortable, maybe it'll be more rewarding. I always feel like the most interesting people to get to know and to talk to are usually the people that maybe are a bit weird or not the easiest to be friends with, you know what I mean? And that's something that I would stress when approaching people with disabilities, is just give them the chance to be who they are, and don't sort of impress your ideas about, you know, what disability is supposed to be onto them. Yeah, but anyway, back to the video and stuff like that. I would say this is key for, like, anyone. Like, being open about sex is important in any context, but with people with disabilities, I feel like it's especially so, just because they'll have their own limitations, and it'll be, I guess you'll have to be creative in how you approach the situation and make the person feel comfortable, like they have the capacity to talk about that really openly. I feel like in that way I have a really good filter, because I'll filter out a lot of assholes who don't have time for talking, and I'm just like, oh, obviously, like, they're not even going to approach me, so I don't have to worry about those people. But yeah, in my own experience generally, people do want to take their time anyway. Like, people, like, obviously you've got your one night stand situations where it's all like super fast and nobody really thinks about anything, it just goes with the moment and stuff, and that's fine. But even in that situation, I feel like you should talk about your wants and what you can and can't do, limits, all that sort of stuff is super important, but especially so with disability, because, like, maybe they can't do it the regular way. And I had a big hang-up about that when I was a little bit younger, about not being able to have sex the regular way. But then, like, as I've gone along, I've realised, like, there is no regular way. Sex is either fun or it's not fun. And usually if it's not fun, you're going to stop anyway, try something different perhaps. Like, as long as everybody's enjoying themselves, it doesn't really matter how you get to the end, right? Just as long as you're all having fun. And that's what sex is. It doesn't matter if things don't go in certain places or you've got to hang things up, it's all the same. Yeah, that's confusing without context. I have this one joke that I tell usually people that I feel like I'm having a good vibe with and maybe there's potential there for something. I have this joke where usually at a certain point in the night they'll be drunk or whatever and they'll just lean in and they'll be like, "So love, how did it happen?" And I always have the same reaction. I thought, no, this is a good opportunity to gauge how fun this person is. And I lean in and I go, "Do you really want to know?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, no, I want to know." I'm like, "Okay. Sex swing accident." And there's that moment of like, "Oh God." Like, obviously they don't know if I'm joking. So like they're looking at me like, What? And I'm like, "Yeah." And how did that work? And I'm super vague about it. And I'm just like, we looked at the instructions. Slot A didn't go into slot B, and before you do it. And then I laugh at this point, and they're like, "Oh, phew, okay." She's joking. But it's like, it's a great way to sort of get where the person's at mentally about sex and about open communication and stuff like that. And were you to approach any person with a disability, definitely stress that. Just good humour. Everybody likes to have a laugh during sex, I feel. And if they don't, well, they're kind of lame anyway. Let's be fair. Nobody wants a wet blanket in bed. And my last point I have is the disability services on campus. So I don't know how much you guys know about this, but there is like a disability liaison office up above the Ethernet space, where Out to Lunch is, and then you've got that internet cafe, and then you go up from there. I guess you could walk up from the library. There's a disability services spot there, and they do great stuff. They get you this thing called a reasonable adjustment, which is a letter that basically outlines what your capabilities are and whether you need extra time in exams, whether you need a room to yourself to do your exam in. If you are the type of person that gets fatigued and can't attend a whole lecture or a whole tube, they put that into account. And it's good to go to as well if you're having like emotional issues. Like, I get depression quite a lot, and I go to them and I say, "Look, my depression's quite bad at the moment. Can I tell my tutors and maybe get some extension on essays and things like that?" And they're really good for that, being like the liaison between your professors and and them, I guess, and you, helping everybody facilitate your needs and take your limits into account, I suppose. So that's a good resource to be aware of when you're around campus. I only learned about it like the second year I was here, and that's because nobody told me. So I feel like it's important for me to say now, just so people know. And I think that's basically all the points that I had. Oh, also, I'm thinking about starting up a Facebook community group page for people with disabilities as like a focal point for people on campus, but also just in the general community, to make a point of contact and interact with each other, talk about studies, share articles that we find really interesting about disability, mental health, stuff like that. And that's just an idea that I have. Hoping to start that up with a couple of friends of mine soon, and that's something that I'd really like to put together. Would you guys be interested in something like that? Cool. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's good to know. All right, I think that's everything from me. Thank you.
With the disability services, how did you find like the kind of initial process of like getting registered with disability services?
It's quite intensive.
Yeah,
They
I
make
found
you.
it's complicated and very unclear. Sometimes.
Yeah, they do ask quite a lot of questions, and they do require you to go to your GP to confirm that you do have whatever condition it is that you're seeking. So you do have to have an initial meeting with them. It's like an introductory meeting to explain what your limits are and why you think you need disability services. And then basically fill out paperwork, go to your doctor, they confirm your paperwork, you bring it back, and if everything checks out, they'll provide you with as much service as you need, sort of thing, and they'll let you know the services they have available. Like for me, when I first got here, I had trouble using the printers because they're like fucking up here and I'm down here, and so I'd be like typing this things in to print stuff off. There's an actual access room that you can go to that has lower printers and lower desks and things like that for you to use, which you can get once you have disability services approval, but you do have to go through them to be able to access these services. So it's important to be aware of, I think. Yeah, but they are it does take quite some time to get it all passed. But once you've done the initial struggle, I think it's worth it. It's definitely been worth it for me. But like I say, my disability is very obvious, so maybe for somebody that has more like emotional, psychological issues, it might be a little bit more difficult for them, but give it a shot. Like, what have you got to lose? So, yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, on the note of like it being particularly obvious, that makes it seem weird to me that it took so long before you were actually aware of what services available were. Like, did people just assume you already knew because they were like, oh, she's in a wheelchair, she must already be signed up with them, or what was going on?
I had no idea. Like I think the moment I realised was when I was talking with someone from IT because my password didn't work, and that guy just happened to be the guy that runs the access room, and I was talking with him about my password, and he's like, blah blah blah, access room. I'm like, Carl, what you talking about, Carl? And there's a whole room that you can go to. How do you not know about this room? I'm like, I don't know, Carl, I've been here a year. Why has nobody told me about this? He's like, you gotta talk to some people. I'm like, all right, I'll do that, Carl. Thanks, Carl. He's like my favourite person. I love Carl. Yeah, it's just UOW's quite. It's the same thing with Centrelink, I find. If you don't actively ask for things, people ain't going to give you things. No, not with anything. So unless you know already about things that are available, you're not going to get them. So that's why I'm saying this now, so people know.
Did they not give you much like orientation or whatever? Like you said, like tailored kind of?
No, basically they were putting me through the exact same process as everyone else was going. Like my whole first year, I was going to like the regular massive exam rooms, which are hard for regular people to navigate, right? Try getting this thing through those spindly little chairs while people are sitting around, and then I'm directions disorientated at the best of times. I'm trying to find this number. I'm just like, I want to go home. That's how I felt at exams. But once, I was aware of disability services, they said, no, you can have your own room to do your exam in. It was a lot better. So, yeah, it's just hopeless, really.
I have to agree that the university, like if you're a minority or a limitation, or like, if you're in any type of subgroup that would potentially need support, the university doesn't outreach to you.
No.
And it's very frustrating, especially when in first year, at least for me, I was very like, I'm here to learn. I don't need friends. I don't, like, not in a bad way, just like I'm comfortable by myself. I don't really want to interact heavily with other people. I just want to like trot along, do my homework and go home, because my degree is very content heavy, so I don't have a lot of time for other stuff. And then just finding the time to interact with these social gatherings is really, really hard, and it's only once you start interacting with these types of things you realize the resources the university has, which I think is a big limitation for the university.
Definitely. They should definitely be more vocal about the types of help that you can receive. I mean, just academic help doesn't even have to be to do with disability or anything. Like just the kinds of things that you can apply for to help you if you're having like a strenuous time at uni. There are options out there. So if you feel like you're stressing about this one, essay that you've got due, or you're not quite prepared for that exam, talk to somebody about it, because there are options available. Like you don't have to needlessly stress. People are here to help. So yeah.
So does the paperwork with the disability services take a long time? Because
Yeah.
And then most of the guys, my spine is just like really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes about a month altogether, I would say. It takes quite a while. So in between now and then, I would suggest just bringing your own things to help support you. Like if you have a cushion or something, that could help. Just whatever you can do to help yourself in the meantime before they process everything. Also, keep on to them about it. Keep calling them and being like, hi, I've got this pretty severe issue that I need rectifying. If you could push it along as fast as possible. Like, don't be pushy, because then I feel like they'll just take their time because. But be polite, but be firm. This is a need that I have. Please address it, sort of thing. Yeah.
My question is sort of maybe there's the university problems, but one step down, maybe have you got feedback on what teachers can do, or what sort of structures they can put in place, even like when you were talking about making sure that we don't start classes until a couple minutes past the half mark, just to make sure everyone's got a chance to arrive and things like that, and making sure we do finish at the 25 mark point instead of pushing it. Have you got other bits of advice and feedback on things for teachers?
Yeah. If you're having issues, definitely let your teachers and your tutors know. If you need extra time, just tell them. Tell them, look, I might be late a couple of minutes each day to class because I'm having this issue. Generally, the teachers are pretty good. Like, they'll take you into account. Just be open with them. Usually, like through disability services, if you do go through them, they'll let your tutors know. Like, they'll send out like a copy of your, like the list of issues that you have. They'll let them know so your teachers are fully aware of everything. But if you're not going through disability services, I would just say, just talk to them and be like, I have these problems, and can you please be aware of that when you're starting and finishing, you know, I might have to leave early, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. Yeah, just open communication.
Well, I'm going to run now, but I really enjoyed your talk.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Good to see you.
See ya.
Should we wrap up?
Yeah, that's everything from me, guys. Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you.